So you've nailed those diatonic triads and seventh chords. Now it's time to dive into your first secondary dominant, the 5 of 6. This simple concept is the key to unlocking the next level in your musical journey. But before we get into why it's a game changer, you need to understand the circle of fifths. And guess what? If you're a pro at key signatures, you already know it. Picture this. The circle of fifths is like an ultimate roadmap of all 12 musical notes arranged in a circle. Each node is a fifth above the next note as you go around the circle clockwise. And trust me, understanding this is going to amp up your musical game big time. Here's the circle of fifths in C. Every note is a perfect fifth away from the next note. And when we graph the major scale, we get this. Notice how this graph contains all the notes from the C major scale: B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. And this graph will represent the major scale for any note that we put at the top of the circle. If we rotate the notes so that F is at the top, then this graph will contain all the notes from F major. Notice how the B natural goes out of the graph while the B flat becomes part of the graph. And that's why the F major scale has one flat, B flat. Rotate it one more time and you get the B flat major scale. The E natural moves out of the graph and the E flat becomes part of the graph. B flat has two flats, B flat and E flat. And as we keep turning the notes around the circle, the order in which these flats appear is the same as the order of the flats in the key signatures you know so well. And that also happens when you rotate the notes counterclockwise. In G major, the F goes out of the graph while the F sharp becomes part of the graph. So G major has one sharp, F sharp. And of course, the order in which these sharps appear is the one we used for key signatures with sharps. In our previous lessons, we practiced essential chord progressions using triads and then seventh chords. And these were the 2-5-1, the 6-2-5-1, and the 3-6-2-5-1. But take a look at this. If we label the notes in the circle with the degrees they represent, we get those exact progressions. Here's the 2-5-1. Here's the 6-2-5-1. And here's the 3-6-2-5-1. So do you see what's happening here? These essential progressions all follow the notes in the circle of fifths. And that's because in harmony, the bass movement of a perfect fifth is the most significant one of all. So in step 1, we're going to play notes from the circle of fifths in the order that they appear, starting on different notes. If we start on C, we get this. If we start on F, we get this. Of course, these two examples contain the same 12 notes in the same order. We're just starting on different notes. So you can clearly see this is just a circular pattern, but trust me, starting on different notes is still a good exercise to practice. Now play it starting on A, but this time without the aid of the notes in the score. In step 2, we're going to practice this line. Let me show you why. When you look at the circle of fifths, any 3 consecutive notes creates a bass line for a 2-5-1 progression, which is one of the most important progressions in music. G, C, F is the bass line for a 2-5-1 in the key of F. D, G, C is the bass line for a 2-5-1 in the key of C. A, D, and G is the bass line for a 2-5-1 in the key of G. E, A, D is the bass line for a 2-5-1 in the key of D. And B, E, A is the bass line for a 2-5-1 in the key of A. And you can see any of these as a 2-5 that resolves to a target. B minor 7 to E7 is a 2-5 that targets A major 7 in the key of A. Now in the key of A, the 2-5 that targets A major 7 is right here at the top of the circle. But in the key of C, the A is down here, and it's a minor 7 chord. The 2-5 that targets this A minor 7 is, of course, right here, B to E. But in C major, the diatonic chords are B minor 7 flat 5 and E minor 7. And if we play the progression B minor 7 flat 5 to E minor 7 to A minor 7, it doesn't sound like a 2-5. It sounds like a 7-3-6, as it should. Not very exciting. But if we turn the E minor 7 into a dominant chord, E7, now we have a 2-5 that targets our 6th chord, A minor 7, beautifully. This is what we call a secondary 2-5. The E7 is a secondary dominant, and the B minor 7 flat 5 is known as the related 2 chord. A related 2 chord is simply the 2 chord in a 2-5 progression that targets another chord. And the only difference between our 3 chord, E minor 7, and the 5 of 6, E7, is that G sharp. By just raising the G natural to a G sharp, we turn E minor 7 into E7. And now the progression B minor 7 flat 5 to E7 to A minor 7 is a 2-5 of 6 that then resolves to the 6th chord. Notice how the B minor 7 flat 5 is our 7 minor 7 flat 5 diatonic chord from the key of C major. We haven't changed it at all, but now we're reinterpreting its functionality by turning it into a related 2 that targets our 6th chord. B minor 7 flat 5 is now the 2 of 6. And this is the most common role that a 7 minor 7 flat 5 will play in any progression. Not as a 7 chord, but as the 2 of 6. Remember, the only note we're changing is the G on that E minor 7 chord to G sharp, just to turn it into an E dominant 7. Now we can extend our essential progressions even more. So instead of a 3-6-2-5-1, we can now play a 2 of 6, 5 of 6 to 6, 2, 5, 1. So now let's go back to step 2 for a second. We're going to play the bass line for this new progression that uses a secondary 2-5 of 6. And the best way to practice this bass line is to start on the 1 chord. So we start on C, the 1 chord. Now we move a half step down to get to our 7th degree, B natural. Remember, this B, although it looks and sounds as a 7 minor 7 flat 5 diatonic chord, it's actually going to function as the 2 of 6. And now we follow the circle of fifths. The E is going to be the bass for our 5 of 6, not the 3 chord. And then we have a 6, 2, 5, 1. And if we keep going around the circle of fifths, we get to the F, the 4 chord. Finally, we can reinforce our new concept by replaying the 2, 5 of 6 to the 6th chord. And notice how this F to B is the only bass line that moves by way of a tritone. Listen to the bass line. Listen to the progression with the chords. It's really important that you notice that all these notes are still diatonic to the key of C major. We're not playing one single note outside of our major scale. We're just changing the perspective of what the chord's functions are. In the key of F major, we would start with our root F. Then move a half step to get to our E minor 7 flat 5 chord, functioning again as the 2 of 6. Then we would go around the circle of fifths in F until we get to our 4 chord, B flat major 7. And now we leap by way of a tritone to E minor 7 flat 5, which again is our 2 of 6. And then we do a 2, 5 of 6 that resolves to our 6, D minor. Practice this step in all keys by thinking of these concepts. Finally, in step 3, we're going to practice the diatonic 7th chords around the circle of fifths like this. Notice that we're starting on the 3 chord and playing a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 and extending it one more chord around the circle of fifths to the 4 chord. And then we leap a tritone away to get to our 7 chord. which we'll now again reinterpret as the 2 of 6. And at the end, we resolve the last note a half step down. This will give us G sharp, the third of our secondary dominant, which turns our diatonic E minor 7 into an E7, a secondary dominant. The cool thing about this exercise is that when you do it in all keys around the circle of fifths, the last chord, E7, now becomes a pivot chord that targets the 3 chord of the new key, F major. And by the way, I also suggest that you practice drawing the circle of fifths in all keys. And think of these properties while you're doing it. Here's the 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Here's the tritone leap from the 4 to the 7, which could actually be functioning as a related 2 in a 2, 5 of 6 right here. A nice exercise to practice is to play this last step while looking at the circle of fifths in the current key. I hope that was helpful. Remember, all these exercises in all keys are included in our From Jazz to Classical Volume 1 course. So visit mdex.com and get your copy today. All of our members will receive a PDF with today's exercise in the key of C. And if you're not a member yet, you can join us right here on YouTube by clicking on the Join button. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next video.